They say Superman could save any world, but they never imagined what would happen when the last son of Krypton met the corrupted lands of Azeroth. In this dark tale, we explore how a hero who could punch through mountains and move faster than light discovered that in Azeroth, salvation itself becomes damnation. And if you genuinely enjoy this kind of dark storytelling, consider subscribing and liking the channel, but only if it truly resonates with you. Watch as the Man of Steel faces the impossible choice between accepting every corruption to save a dying world or watching infinite suffering while keeping his soul clean. The sky tore open above Hillsbrad that day, not with the green fire of Legion portals, not with the purple void of old god manifestations. This was different. Pure white light, clean and terrible, split the clouds like a blade through rotten flesh. I was there, a battle mage of Dalaran, sent to investigate the renewed conflict between South Shore survivors and Forsaken forces. The war never ends in Lordaeron. It just finds new corpses to animate, new grievances to nurture. But what fell from that tear in reality would change everything. He hit the ground between our battle lines like a falling star. The earth itself recoiled. Undead and living alike were thrown back by the impact. When the dust cleared, a man stood in the crater. But calling him a man feels like calling Deathwing a lizard. He wore strange garments, red and blue, with a symbol on his chest that meant nothing to any of us. His eyes burned with an inner light that wasn't holy, wasn't arcane, wasn't anything we understood. The Forsaken attacked first. They always do when confused. Dark arrows whistled through the air, shadow magic coiling around the shafts. They struck him and shattered like glass on granite. He looked at them with such sadness. Not fear, not anger, just this terrible, infinite sadness that made my chest ache. Then he moved. I've seen demon hunters dash through reality. I've watched death knights charge through armies. This was beyond all of that. One moment he stood in the crater. The next, every Forsaken weapon within 100 yards was crushed to powder in his hands. He hadn't hurt them. He'd simply removed their ability to hurt others. The Alliance soldiers cheered. They thought he was their salvation. They were wrong. We were all wrong. He spoke in a tongue that the magical translation weaves struggled to pass. But his meaning came through clear enough. He asked about the fighting, asked why the dead walked, asked where he was. Captain Morris of the 7th Legion stepped forward, chest puffed with pride. He started explaining about the noble alliance, about our righteous war against the Horde's barbarism, about how this stranger's power could finally bring peace through victory. The stranger, he would later tell us his name was Kal-El, listened with that same sadness deepening in his eyes. Then he turned to the Forsaken. Their leader, a priestess named Thessa, whose jaw hung loose from rot, began her own tale. About survival, about being hunted for the crime of undeath, about the Alliance's attempts to reclaim lands that belong to the dead now. Have you ever wondered which of Azeroth's corruptions would claim them first? Drop your theories in the comments. I need to know I'm not alone in thinking about this. I watched him process these incompatible truths. In his world, he told us later, there was good and evil, heroes and villains, clear lines drawn in moral sand. But here the dead could be victims. Here the living could be monsters. Here a mother's love could birth plague, and a father's grief could summon demons. He tried to make peace. Of course he did. He stood between the two forces and spoke of understanding, of finding common ground. The words had barely left his lips when the ground beneath us began to writhe. Black tentacles, each as thick as ancient trees, erupted from the earth. The whispers started immediately, and Zoth had noticed our visitor. The old god's attention fell upon this being of impossible power, and I saw Kal-El's eyes widen in shock. He could hear them, all of them, the thousand voices that lesser minds could barely comprehend. He heard with perfect clarity. The tentacles lashed at him with speed that defied their size. He caught them, bare hands wrapped around appendages that had crushed cities. His muscles strained, and for the first time, I saw him truly exert himself. The tentacles began to smoke where he held them, not from heat, from something else, something his very nature rejected about their existence. But touching the old god's flesh has a price. Always. I saw the moment it began. A flicker in his eyes. The whispers had found purchase, not in weakness, but in strength. They spoke to his desire to save everyone. They showed him visions. If he accepted just a fragment of the Void's power, he could remake Azeroth. No more war, no more undeath, no more suffering. All he had to do was embrace the darkness to spread his light. He tore the tentacles apart with a roar that shattered windows in Tarren Mill, miles away. But the damage was done. The seed was planted. N'Zoth's whispers had found something they'd never encountered. A being whose greatest strength was compassion, whose fatal flaw was hope. The Alliance and Horde forces had stopped fighting each other. They stared at this impossible being who had torn apart manifestations of an old god with his bare hands. Some knelt, some fled, some wept. Captain Morris approached again, this time with military precision replacing his earlier pride. He spoke of immediate conscription, of duty to the Alliance, of the war that could finally be won. The Forsaken Priestess countered, speaking of freedom, of choosing one's own path, of not becoming another weapon in the Alliance's arsenal. Both sides began to press closer. Weapons were drawn again, but this time they watched him, waiting to see which side would claim this living weapon. That's when the light responded to him. It started as a glow around his form, not the light as we knew it, not the organized, regimented power of the Naru or the desperate faith of priests. This was raw, undiluted stellar energy responding to something in his physiology. The light wanted to claim him as its champion, but so did the void, still whispering. So did the Fel, drawn to his unlimited potential. So did death itself, curious about a being that seemed beyond its reach. Every cosmic force in Azeroth suddenly had its eyes on one man. The ground began to crack under the pressure of so much attention. Reality itself groaned. Kal-El looked at the approaching forces, at the soldiers ready to die or kill to claim him, at the tentacles already regenerating from below. He made a choice that would doom us all. He fled, not from cowardice, from wisdom that came too late. He launched himself skyward with such force that the shockwave leveled what remained of South Shore's ruins. Both armies were scattered like leaves. But you can't flee from cosmic forces. You can't outrun corruption when it's already taken root. I saw him hovering there, a red and blue speck against the grey sky, trying to understand what he'd stumbled into, trying to find the right choice in a world without right choices. The whispers followed him. They always would now. And N'Zoth had tasted something unprecedented. A being of near infinite power, with a soul that genuinely wanted to save everyone. In Azeroth, that desire is the deadliest curse of all. The armies below had stopped fighting entirely. Word spread through magical communication, mundane ravens, and desperate prayers. A being of impossible power had arrived. The Alliance mobilized every resource to find and recruit him. The Horde did the same, seeing either an opportunity or a threat that couldn't be ignored. The Scourge stirred in Northrend, curious about flesh that seemed immune to decay. The Burning Legion's observers took note, wondering if this was some new Titan construct. But worst of all, in the depths of the sea, in the prison of Ny'alotha, N'Zoth began to laugh. It had found the perfect vessel for its return, not through corruption of the weak, but through the manipulation of the strong. All it needed was time and pressure. In Azeroth, both were infinite. I tracked him for 3 days before I found him. My scrying spells kept failing. His presence disrupted magic in ways that made my teeth ache. But eventually, I located him in the hinterlands, sitting atop one of the ancient Amani ruins, staring at his hands, the hands that had torn apart an old god's flesh. He heard me approach despite my silence spells. When he turned, I saw the first real signs of change. Thin purple veins, barely visible, traced patterns under his skin. They pulsed with each heartbeat. The whispers had left their mark. He asked me about this world, about its history, so I told him. I explained the Sundering, how ancient Kalimdor was torn apart by the Well of Eternity's destruction. I spoke of the Legion's invasions, of Sargeras and his burning crusade across infinite worlds. I told him about Arthas, the prince who became the Lich King to save his people, only to damn them all. With each word, I watched him sink deeper into himself. In his world, he said, evil could be punched, villains could be stopped, heroes could save the day, but here every salvation was another damnation wearing different clothes. Here, the road to the twisting nether was paved with heroic intentions. The Wildhammer dwarves found us first. Their griffin riders had been searching on behalf of the Alliance. They spoke of duty, of honor, of the greater good. They promised him a place among heroes, a chance to turn the tide against the Horde's aggression. They didn't mention the internment camps. They didn't mention Taurajo. They didn't mention the 1,000 small genocides that built their noble alliance. He listened with that terrible patience of his. Then he asked a simple question that silenced them. If the Alliance was good, why did the Forsaken exist? Why did the dead fear them more than they feared dying again? The dwarves had no answer that didn't sound like justification for murder. The Horde found us next. Blood elves, beautiful and terrible. Their eyes glowing with fell energy they'd consumed to survive. They spoke of freedom, of survival against impossible odds, of races united not by ideology, but by necessity. They offered him power without judgment, acceptance without conditions. But he could see the green fire in their eyes, could smell the demon magic in their blood. When he asked about it, they spoke proudly of their prince Arthas, of the lengths they'd gone to survive. They didn't mention the children who'd withered from magic withdrawal. They didn't mention the families torn apart when some chose fell and others chose death. If you had their power in Azeroth, would you choose Alliance, Horde, or stay neutral? Tell me in the comments. I'll be reading them. He chose neutral. Of course he did. He thought he could stay above it all, help everyone equally. That's when Azeroth taught him its cruelest lesson. Neutrality here isn't noble. It's another form of choosing sides, the side of whoever's dying slowest. The Scarlet Crusade came for him in force. They declared him an abomination, a false prophet sent to deceive the faithful. Their light was twisted, fed by fanaticism, until it burned everything it touched. They attacked with zealot's fury, holy fire that seared even my magical shields. He didn't fight back, not at first. He tried to reason with them, tried to explain. But have you ever tried to reason with someone whose faith has curdled into madness? They saw his mercy as weakness, his restraint as proof of guilt. When they started killing the Wildhammer dwarves for consorting with him, when they began burning the Blood Elves alive, something in him snapped, not into violence, into action. He disarmed them all in seconds. Every weapon melted in his hands. Every piece of armor crumpled like paper. But he didn't understand that in Azeroth, taking away someone's ability to fight is often crueler than killing them. The Crusade members fled, weaponless and humiliated. Within days, they'd been slaughtered by the Forsaken. They could no longer fight. Their blood was on his hands, even though he'd never drawn it himself. That's when the true corruption began. The guilt ate at him like acid. The whispers of N'Zoth grew louder, showing him visions of what he could accomplish with just a little more power. They showed him Azeroth united under his protection. They showed him the undead restored to life, the demons banished forever, the old gods sealed beyond recovery. All possible if he just accepted what they offered. The Legion tried next. Dreadlords materialized around us, their words honey-sweet poison. They spoke of order through strength, of ending suffering by ending free will. They showed him visions of worlds they'd conquered. Peaceful now, silent now, no longer capable of the pain that defined Azeroth. They offered him a general's position, command of armies that could bring that same peace here. He refused, but I saw him hesitate. For just a moment, faced with infinite suffering, the silence of the Legion seemed almost merciful. The dragons came then, Alexstrasza herself, the Lifebinder, drawn by the disturbance he created in the cosmic forces. She was magnificent and terrible, her scales the color of heart's blood, her eyes holding the weight of every life that had ever been. She looked at him and wept. She could see what we couldn't. His body was absorbing everything around him, the background radiation of the Sunwell's destruction, the residual energy from the Well of Eternity, the latent corruption from the old god's prisons. He was becoming a confluence of every force that had ever touched Azeroth. His cells were adapting, evolving, trying to survive in a world where survival itself was corruption. She offered him sanctuary in Wormrest Temple, a place to rest, to be studied, to perhaps find a cure. But even as she spoke, I saw her doubt. There was no cure for Azeroth. There was only managing the symptoms while the disease spread. That's when the Lich King spoke to him, not Arthas. The entity itself, the force of undeath given consciousness, it whispered directly into his mind, bypassing his incredible physical defenses. It spoke of ending death by embracing it, of saving everyone by making sure no one could truly die again. It showed him visions of a world without loss, where every person who fell in battle simply rose again, preserved forever. The purple veins in his skin deepened to black for a moment. Just a moment, but we all saw it. He fled again, this time deeper into the wilderness. But you can't flee from yourself. The corruption wasn't coming from outside anymore. It was growing within, fed by his desire to help, nurtured by his inability to accept that some things couldn't be fixed. I followed him to the Plague Lands, where he tried to help. He thought, if he could just do enough good, it would balance out the corruption spreading through him. He pulled entire towns from the path of the Scourge. He incinerated thousands of undead with beams of light from his eyes. He tried to heal the land itself, pouring his power into soil that had been dead for years. The land responded, but not with life. Where his power touched, new things grew. Amalgamations of life and undeath, plants that breathed but weren't alive, trees that bled but couldn't die. He'd created something unprecedented, a fusion of forces that should have been opposite. The druids who witnessed it went mad. The priests who tried to cleanse it found their magic turned against them. He stood in the middle of his accidental abominations, watching them pulse with impossible life. That's when I saw him break, not dramatically, not with screams or tears, just a quiet surrender in his shoulders, a dimming of that inner light he carried. The Titan's watchers arrived then. Algalon the Observer descended from the stars, his form geometric perfection made manifest. He took one look at Kal-El and began preparations to re-originate the planet. Here was a contamination that threatened the cosmic order itself, a being that could corrupt the fundamental forces by trying to save them. But Kal-El heard the re-origination protocol, heard that Algalon would destroy all life on Azeroth to prevent the spread of this new corruption, and something in him finally truly snapped, not into evil, into desperation. He grabbed Algalon with hands that could crush mountains. He begged. This godlike being actually begged for the lives of people who tried to use him, corrupt him, kill him. He pleaded for more time, for another way, for mercy that the universe's cold mathematics didn't allow. Algalon looked into his eyes and paused. In all his observations across countless worlds, he'd never seen this. A being powerful enough to fight the Titan's will, choosing instead to beg for others. The Observer delayed his judgment and vanished, leaving only questions and cosmic doubt. That's when she came. Sylvanas Windrunner, the Banshee Queen herself. She didn't come with armies or demands. She came alone, her dead eyes seeing something in him that we living couldn't understand. She spoke of freedom through acceptance, of power through surrender. She told him the truth none of us had been brave enough to voice. He was dying. His body, miraculous as it was, couldn't process the conflicting energies of Azeroth. The light and void were tearing him apart at the cellular level. The fel was burning through his veins while death tried to claim what life wouldn't release. He had perhaps days before the contradictions tore him apart, but she offered him a solution. Undeath. Willing undeath, unlike what she had suffered. He could become something new, powerful enough to resist all corruptions, because he would have already fallen to the ultimate one. He could become death's champion against death itself. The offer hung in the air like plague smoke. I wanted to scream at him to refuse. But what alternative did we have? Let him die? Let his power dissipate into the twisting nether where demons would feast on it for millennia? That's when the old gods played their final card. All four spoke as one, even dead Yusharj's echo joining the chorus. They offered him the truth. They showed him visions not of corruption but of clarity. Azeroth itself was wounded, had been wounded since the Titans ripped Yusharj from its surface. The world soul was dying slowly, inevitably. Every faction, every force, every power that fought over this world was just bacteria feeding on a corpse. But he could change that. With his power combined with theirs, they could heal Azeroth. Not dominate it, not corrupt it further, but actually heal it. Remove the wounds, seal the tears, make it whole. The price would be accepting the void into himself, becoming a vessel for forces that existed before reality. He looked at me then. This god being looked at a simple battle mage and asked what he should do. As if I had answers, as if anyone could solve a problem written into the universe's source code. I told him the only truth I knew. In Azeroth, everyone falls. The only choice is how you fall and who you take with you. He made his choice then, not the one any of us expected. He flew to Icecrown Citadel, to the frozen throne itself. The new Lich King, Bolvar for Dragon, sat in eternal torment, holding back the scourge through will alone. Kal-El knelt before him and made an offer that shook the foundations of death itself. He would take the crown, not to rule the dead, but to transform them. His unique nature, corrupted by every force in Azeroth, might be able to change undeath itself, turn it from a curse into something else. What exactly, nobody knew, but it couldn't be worse than what existed. Bolvar refused at first. The crown's weight had already broken one hero, but Kal-El didn't want to wear it. He wanted to merge with it, to fundamentally alter what the Lich King was, to use his dying body as a crucible for transformation. The ritual took 3 days. I watched from afar as every power in Azeroth converged on Icecrown. The Alliance and Horde ceased fighting, both armies standing witness to something unprecedented. Dragons circled overhead, Demon portals opened as the Legion observed. The very earth cracked as old gods strained to see. When he put on the crown, reality screamed. The transformation was immediate and absolute. His body became a prism for every force he'd absorbed. The helm of domination shattered and reformed, becoming something new. Not a crown of control, but a lens of transformation. The scourge didn't kneel to him. They changed. Undeath began to evolve. The mindless became aware. The enslaved found fragments of will. It wasn't redemption or restoration. It was metamorphosis into something Azeroth had never seen. Some Forsaken wept as they felt sensations they'd thought lost forever. Some Death Knights found their frozen hearts beating with something that wasn't life, but wasn't death either. But every transformation has a price. As Undeath evolved, so did he. The being that had been Kal-El ceased to exist in any way we could understand. He became a force, a concept, a living paradox that existed between all states. Not alive, not dead, not good, not evil. Something else, something necessary. The last time I saw him, he was standing at the Frozen Throne's peak, his form shifting between solid and ethereal, between every color and none. He spoke, and his voice carried across all of Northrend. He said he finally understood. Azeroth couldn't be saved because it wasn't dying. It was transforming, had always been transforming. Every corruption, every war, every tragedy was labor pain for something unimaginable. He would shepherd that transformation, neither hastening nor preventing it, simply ensuring it happened. The world's reactions were as varied as its people's. Some called him the Dark Savior, others named him the Metamorphosis King. The Void Lords retreated, uncertain what to make of a being that had accepted all corruptions and become something beyond them. The Titans fell silent, their calculations unable to process this anomaly. And in the depths of Neolotha, N'Zoth's laughter turned to screams. It had created something beyond its ability to control or understand. The perfect vessel had become the impossible prison, containing every corruption by accepting them all. He remains there still, at the top of the world, neither hero nor villain. Pilgrims climb to seek his wisdom, but he speaks only in paradoxes now. Warriors challenge him, but he neither fights nor flees, simply exists in states that make violence meaningless. The dead congregate around Icecrown, drawn by the promise of transformation, of becoming something more than their curse. Some say he's saving us. Others claim he's damning us to something worse than any old god could imagine. But I know the truth. He's doing what heroes do in Azeroth. He's falling, just more slowly than the rest of us. And in his fall, he's teaching us that perhaps the landing matters less than how we transform on the way down. The war continues. It always does. Alliance and Horde still clash, though now they pause when the transformed undead walk between their battles. The Legion plots, the old gods whisper, the Dragon's Age, but something fundamental changed when that strange visitor came to our world. Hope itself transformed. Not into something better or worse, but into something that could survive Azeroth. And perhaps, in a world where survival requires corruption, that's the closest thing to salvation we'll ever know.